Hi, uh, thank you for your patience. I think we can start now. So again, thank you all for being here today. We'll start by introducing ourselves. So I'm here with Jeremy today.
Hi everyone.
And so just to give you a quick word about who we are and what Digital Food Lab does on a daily basis. So with Jeremy, we've been working together for the past 10 years. Initially, we created a food tech startup here in Paris. We developed it, sold it in 2017, and created Digital Food Lab, basically to help this ecosystem of food tech grow, specifically in Europe, but also at a larger scale globally. And what we do is pretty simple, I would say. We mostly do consulting with food corporations. So from ag to food to retail and also to finance. And we help those people to first understand what's happening, what is their innovation ecosystem, and then to identify what are the opportunities in their ecosystem, and finally to act on them. And we are also investors into a dozen of food tech startups, mostly in Europe. And we are advisor and board members to startups and VC funds. So if that could be an interesting point for you, please reach out. So first, we'd like to thank our two sponsors for this year. First, Nestle, which has been our sponsor for the past 3 years, so which helps these two sponsors, Nestle and Pinduoduo, help us to release this report and make it public. And so we are very glad and thank them for the support. And for those of you who don't know Pinduoduo, I really highly recommend you to look at it. It's very, very interesting startup, no a public company, but a startup in China with a very, very huge reach. It's the first agri-food marketplace in China. So quite exciting and interesting new business model, which I think could influence and also inspire many entrepreneurs in Europe, in America, and other parts of the world. Today, what we'll do will be really simple. First, we'll do an introduction to show you the main findings of our report on the European food tech ecosystem. And then with Jeremy, we'll have a chat and we'll answer your different questions. So you can already start asking them. So directly in the Q&A space that you can find on the Zoom bar tool. So let's jump in. We'll start, as I said on the screen, with the very basics, because we will be talking about investments and the state of the European food tech ecosystem. But first, I would like to answer, if that's possible, two questions. What is food tech, and maybe even what is a startup? So yeah, what is food tech? So on our site with Digital Food Lab, I think it was 5 years ago, we put this definition of food tech on our first website, which was basically to give meaning to something that a lot of people were starting to talk about, but which didn't have a real definition. So for us, food tech is the ecosystem that is made of all agri-food entrepreneurs and startups that are innovating on products, distribution, marketing, and business models. What does that mean? Is basically that it's young companies, entrepreneurs innovating all along the food value chain, from ag to delivery to food products. And that's something that is quite important for us, because we see entrepreneurs innovating on agriculture, on transformation, on distribution, and on, I would say, cookware products, appliances that are often even related to medtech or healthcare. But what is really important is that startups are shortening the this food value chain, and they are really disrupting the way we see it. And now we see that with this shortening of time between the release of products and its reach to consumers, we see ag companies that now have the need to look at what consumers want in order to conceive the new products. So it's really important to keep in mind that food tech is a really more and more integrated ecosystem. Then, second question, I'm sure that's quite clear for all of you, but that's something that keeps going again and again, and we like to, I would say, share our contribution to this very big and somewhat controversial question about what is a startup. So for us, it's basically two things. First, a startup is what we can call a fast learning project. So it's a company which business model is not to earn money, but it's to earn knowledge and to do stuff in an action in order to create learnings, and at the end of the day to create what we call product market fit, which basically means you found consumers or customers that are ready to buy your product at a premium. And then we talk about fast growing companies. So what do we mean by that? It's in early stages companies that are growing at around 10% a month. And then when they are more mature, something around 2-3% a month. So I would say a food tech startup, which is in neither of these cases, is certainly more, I would say, CPG company that has rebranded itself into a startup, which is cool, by the way. But it's just that it's not directly what we should be calling a startup. And last basic point, all the data points that I will be showing you are coming from our proprietary database. So we have created our own software and our own database. We have a team of analysts that are daily implementing and adding data to our database to enable us to create reports and obviously to work with our clients on identifying opportunities and trends that they should be looking at. So let's jump in. It's in something I would say more relevant to us today, which is the state of the food tech ecosystem in Europe in 2022. So again, let's start with the basics. Here you have the level of investments in the European food tech ecosystem over the past, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And as you can see, that's maybe the most relevant point, investment really jumped in 2021. We went from a stall, just the same amount of investment, 3 billion in 2019, 2022 due to COVID, and then a huge increase, a threefold increase to 9.5 billion. And just a quick explanation, the difference between the dark blue and the light blue. Light blue is a reflection of deals that we are not aware yet. So as we have more and more deals in the ecosystem, we now see that a small but not insignificant share of deals have been announced some months and even some years after they have been made. So that's why you have even a tiny amount of of light blue on 2019, because we know that we will learn about 2019's deals in 2022 and even later. So where does this money come from? Why do we see such an increase? First, I would say a small contributor is that we have more startups. So as you can see, the number of startups has kept increasing year after year. So we are talking about the number of active startups. So we are, I would say, depleting this number from the number of dead, acquired, IPO'd startups. So the number keeps increasing, not at a very fast pace, but it keeps increasing. And we are even, I would say, quite confident to see that in 2022, it will increase much faster, because we see a lot of new entrepreneurs. But the main explanation of this increase is not because we have more startups. It's not even because we have more deals. We have slightly more deals, but I would say the increase is quite consistent with the past years. What is really impressive is the surge in the median deal size. So what do we see is that at later stage, Series B plus, but also and even more at early stages in seed and Series A, the median deal has highly increased. So it has doubled in seed, so that's quite impressive. In 2019, the median, in 2020, the median deal for a seed was 500,000. It has jumped to 1 million. That's, I would say, unseen and heard of. It's really, really impressive, and that's where the money is coming from. So it's not more deals, it's not more startups, it's mostly bigger deals in startups, and not only in highly developed startups, but mostly in seed and Series A deals. And why is that quite important? Because in the past year, past couple of years, we have been somehow used to see these 1, 2, 3, 400 million deals in startups in Europe, mostly in delivery. And there were this idea, this expectation that this jump in the level of investments was only due to these unicorns, to these huge startups, but it's not the case. As you can see on this graph, in dark blue, you have the deals higher than 200.5 million. You have other deals, but what you can see is that even if we remove the 100 million plus deals, we still have a huge increase in investments. So we have an ecosystem of unicorns, of startup valued more than 1 billion, but we have, and that's, I think, even better, an ecosystem of unicorns, startups that will be at some point, or will be at some point, unicorns, and we have also potential leaders raising 10, 20, 50 million. So we have a leading ecosystem and a potentially leading ecosystem. And that's really, really cool for the European ecosystem, because that's quite a change from the past years where we had a handful of startups raising huge rounds and somehow nobody beyond that. And then that's translated in the number of unicorns created in the ecosystem. If we go back to 2015, what we can see is that year in, year out, we had 1 or 2 startups that reached the unicorn status. But since 2020 and mostly since 2021, the increase is very significant in the number of unicorns. So we have finally cracked the code and the ability to create startups that are valued more than 1 billion, startups that are able to go international. On the 2021 startups, you have already many of them that are present in more than 3 or 5 European markets, and even some of them as Gorillas and Infarm that have crossed the pond and are active in the US. So again, quite cool. And this ability of European startups to reach this status and then to grow international. But because for everything positive, there is somehow a but. We are not in Europe leading the world of food tech. First, to give you a comparison, I would say the GDP of agri-food businesses located in Europe, it's 25% of the global agri-food GDP created by these traditional businesses. So we could have expected European food tech to be reaching at least that level, but that's not the case. And even if we have so many new unicorns, if we looked at them in the mapping of all the food unicorns active globally, we see that European food unicorns are quite lost in all these companies, unicorns globally. And if we looked at the share of investment of the European food tech ecosystem in the global amount invested each year, it's 21%. It's really rising because a couple of years ago we were below 10%. So the amount raised by European food tech startup is increasing in share globally, but it's still the second or third, depending on the data you use to map it. So we still have a huge room to grow, which is somehow positive for this ecosystem, and to be in Europe the leaders of the European food tech ecosystem, of the global food tech ecosystem. So that was Europe versus world. But as you all know, Europe is not a single place or single country. So it's really relevant to look at the various ecosystems. And so to look at where the money went in Europe. So basically on the 9.5 billion, a third went only directly to German startups, mostly fast, quick commerce delivery startups. And then we find, I would say, the usual suspects, the UK with maybe the best ecosystem, France, the Netherlands, Spain, Estonia, mostly with Holic, with, Bolt, Finland, Sweden, Czech Republic with Holic, and Norway. A graph that you can find on the report that I encourage you to download and share with your colleagues and friends will show you the repartition, the distribution by areas. And if we take, for example, the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, it's still leading, but we find that the fourth or even third region is created by the Nordics. So the combination of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. So it's also a way to look at this data differently. Another way to look at countries is to look at how one country's ecosystem is dependent on one or a couple of startups. And that's why we find, as I said, Bolt and Holic in Estonia and Czech Republic, because these countries are, I would say, amount raised by food tech startup. 99% of the amount raised was raised by one startup. So we have these countries: Estonia, Czech Republic, Finland, Spain with Glovo, which is now acquired. So we'll see how the Spanish ecosystem will fare. Norway with Oda, and Netherlands with Picnic are highly dependent on one single startup. And you have, on the other hand, much more diversified ecosystem. Actually, the extreme is the UK, which is the second most active ecosystem in Europe, with more than 1 billion raised, but not a single startup that is making the overall ecosystem. So it's really cool to see that only 30% of the amount raised in the UK are raised by the top 3 startups. So it shows a very strong and growing ecosystem. And then again, if you want to have a look at what's happening in Europe, and for example, you are an investor from the States, from I don't know, from Asia, basically things are happening in cities in London, Stockholm, Berlin, Amsterdam, and Paris. That are very easy 5 stops and the places where things are happening. And even after COVID, with people able to work from anywhere and to raise money from anywhere, we still see this huge concentration of money and talent in these cities and what we can call on the map the food tech European hub. We've looked at the overall amount of money, why we've seen this increase, mostly due to bigger deals. We've looked at areas where money comes from, and we looked at the distribution by categories. So if you remember the start of this presentation, I've shown you the 6 categories of food tech, from agriculture to delivery, food science, new food products, from CPG brands to alternative proteins, food service, innovation in restaurants, supply chain, and notably around packaging, and consumer tech. So without a surprise, most of the money went to delivery in Orange. It's not, again, a surprise because the startup raised huge amount of money due to the need to acquire infrastructure, to build warehouses, etc., etc. But again, what is really cool is to see that even without the 6 billion, the ecosystem would be growing. So we see a growth in most of the areas, notably in food science, but and that again, for every positive you have a negative. In this ecosystem, in European food tech ecosystem, we see that the growth in green of food science and notably in alternative proteins is quite slow. So we don't see the surge of investment that we can see in other areas. And to give you, for example, a very obvious comparison, the overall European alternative protein ecosystem in terms of investment is, I would say, less important than the Israeli one. So Israeli startups working in alternative proteins, this 5 million country, 5 million people country, raise more than the overall European markets. So it's quite crazy to see that. We don't know why. Either there is not an appetite from investors for this market in Europe, etc. But there are some reasons behind it. But there is here a huge area for growth for entrepreneurs, for investors to look at specifically in Europe. We look at the areas that concentrated investment in each of the 4 main categories. All these graphs are available in the report, so we won't go into in depth to explain what all these startups are doing, but we'll just underline the main facts. So in agtech, so startups reinventing or improving the agriculture as we know it. This year, it was mostly investment in urban and indoor farms. So with the example of Infarm, IGS, ONA, etc., etc. So it's a renewal of the ecosystem because of the past years, we had mostly investment in the ag biotech ecosystem and mostly in animal feed created with insects. So we have a reinvention of this ecosystem. Second, in delivery, it won't be a surprise that most of the investments went into quick commerce, so startup delivering food in less than 15 or 10 minutes inside cities, and into new retailers. And to be honest, we are, I would say, much more excited by the second category. And we see the really interesting startups there. And we think that even if the hype and media attention is really targeted to dark stores and quick commerce, they should have a look at what's happening with new retailers as a whole, because we think that the true disruption of food may come from them. Third, which is food science. Obviously, you have an appetite and an interest for alternative proteins, even if, as I said, the amount raised are quite low compared to other areas and other countries. So we have a potential and a room to grow. And a second area that I would like to underline, which is CPG startups. So entrepreneurs which are using the tools of entrepreneurship of startups to create brands, so food brands, beverage brands, etc. Actually, these startups are raising quite a lot of money. They are quite ignored. I would say that there is not a lot of media attention directed to them, but I think they are the most easily built, most easily grown, and in some cases most easily sold startups in the overall food tech ecosystem, and they should deserve a bit more love than they receive right now. And finally, fourth main area, which is food service. Without a surprise, we still have an appetite in Europe for B2B, for e-commerce, and for payment services. So year after year, it's this category which is contributing the most to the amount raised in food service. And quite surprisingly, we have little amounts invested in cloud kitchens. So by that, we mean our definition is cloud kitchen is really the infrastructure. So it's the kitchens themselves, not the brands, which we separate into the virtual restaurant category. But we see very tiny amounts invested into spaces to convert it into kitchens, notably compared to Asia and to the US. So again, I think potential room for growth for entrepreneurs, investors, and corporations looking to invest into this space. And finally, on this space, the food service management area. So companies, they're developing software to help restaurant food service companies to manage their supplies, to manage their personnel, kind of stuff. With 2 new and even 3 new unicorns. So Flipdish, Shoko, and Deliverect, which became unicorns since the start of 2022. So a space that has really strengths and which is stronger in Europe than it is in other markets. And in conclusion, what I would like to underline is if you follow us and look at the content that we produce, you know that each year in autumn we like to produce our state of the trends, global state of the trends in the food tech ecosystem. And when we look at Europe, we have mapped in the various trends in which trend we see Europe as a leader, as a strong follower, or as a weak follower, or even absent. And more than looking at various areas, what we really like when we look at this graph is to compare it with last year's and even with 2 years ago. What I could say is that 2 or 3 years ago, when we looked at this graph, we had much more gray and or light blue and very, very few points in dark blue. So it's evolving, and we have now a European food tech ecosystem that is stronger, which is leading in some areas, and which is looked as a leader by entrepreneurs from all over the world. So again, I would say kudos to all entrepreneurs that are developing these startups and helping us shine. And because that's often the end game for many startups, will end there. We have, I would say, a slightly sorrow point, which is that we don't see an increase at all in the number of acquisitions and IPOs in the ecosystem. We see bigger acquisitions, we see bigger IPOs, but we don't see more of them. So we have more startups, we have more money invested. So it's either about news, which means that at the end of the day, we'll have startups that will be zombie startups without room for exit, or it may be, on the other hand, quite positive news, because in many ways, in many domains, we see such high valuation, such high deals made into startups that acquisition is not possible at any point. So we see an evolution from the idea that a startup is a project conceived to be sold to a larger corporation, to the idea that a startup is here to change for the long term the ecosystem and to work along or to replace the established players. And so in conclusion, again, we see very positive trends, notably an appetite for European startups beyond London and Berlin, which were the only 2 spots that foreign investors were keen on a few years ago. Another point that we've not yet discussed is the fact that we see more and more research getting out of universities that was really a sore point of the European ecosystem compared to Israel, to the US, to Asia. So we see finally spin-offs, and yeah, we see corporations, local or foreign, that are interested to acquire, to look at, to invest into European startups. Really positive trends. We are really bullish on the European FoodTech ecosystem. We know that we'll have somehow more complicated year because of the context, because of the diminution of the amount invested. But we think that we'll have what we could call a soft landing in 2022. And we still see huge appetite for seed, pre-seed startups. So the future of the ecosystem is quite assured. And yeah, as I said, the situation has dramatically changed. It is changing quite fast right now. Funding has become more complicated, and notably for startups that are in some ways far from having a clear path to profitability. And that will be my last point. When we look at this data and when we look at this current situation right now, what we can see is what is cool and hype in one day can be hated and vilipented a few days, or at least a few months and a few years later. So that's the first point. And then we should not misconceive that what entrepreneurs and investors like and invest in is what consumers and food corporations will want to buy, either as a product or as an acquisition. Then again, the hype in the funding market is evolving faster and faster. So it's something that is, I think, quite new to see that trends are moving at such a speed, and a startup that was really hype a few months ago is now hated and not able to raise a single euro. So we'll have to cope with that and to see how it evolves in the next years. So thank you for your attention, and we'll move shortly to your questions. You can already write them in the Q&A tool from Zoom. And in the meantime, a last word. So we obviously invite you to help us to make this passioning global and European FoodTech ecosystem stronger. So you can first subscribe yourself, and obviously subscribe all your friends, colleagues, people that you want to inspire to our newsletter. You can obviously share this report and the other reports on LinkedIn internally, etc., by mentioning us. That would be really nice. You can work with us as a company. So I mentioned what we do with food corporations. If you are an entrepreneur, again, as I said, we invest, we look at startups, we are board members, and finally, you can work with us, Digital Food Lab. We are looking for an analyst to help us broaden our coverage, and also a community manager to share the news and the content we create. So thank you again, and we'll move to Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Mathieu. Thank you, Mathieu, for this great presentation. Regarding some question and message, I just want to remind you that all charts and information from this webinar are from our report on the European ecosystem report, which is available for free on our website. And also this webinar is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So let's start with the first question. Yeah, something about regarding the current market conditions. Can we expect a slowdown in fundraising for this year and maybe next year?
Yeah, and to jump on what you said, this report, this webinar, and all the fact that the graphs are free of charge and available on a website and you can share it, is due to our wonderful sponsors for this report. And obviously you are free to contact us because we are to be sponsor for next year's report, and we have other projects that we are keen to share with the world, because we don't think that this kind of data should be private and should be paying. So yeah, contact us for that. And yeah, for your question on the less positive note, yeah, we will see a significant slowdown. Just for a single reason, on the 9 billion invested, 6.5 were due to delivery, and half of it, 2.9, if I'm right, were linked to quick commerce. And since the start of the year, quick commerce startups in Europe have raised almost zero. So we have Getir, but we don't consider Getir as it is a Turkish company in our report. So we don't have a lot of money. So just this space has somehow vanished. And so that's a single point of explanation for why we will see a slowdown. And then since the start of the war in Ukraine and the financial tightening from central banks, we see investment funds that are keen to somehow sit on their money, and so are less keen to invest into new projects. So yes, there is a slowdown, and the question, as far as the economy as a whole, is: will we see a soft or hard landing? And then, because it's always a question of distribution, in this situation of soft or hard landing, will we have an advantage in Europe compared to Asia and the US? So will we see our share of the overall investment increase or not? Will we see a flight for quality? So that's, I think, quite a lot of question. What we can say right now is that we see two trends. First, indeed, it's harder to raise money when you are raising 10 to 100 or 200 million. It's really harder, so you have to prove. So we see a flight for quality. So startups which were not the best have a really hard time to raise. And we also see, which is something which is really positive, is a huge increase in the amounts invested in seed, pre-seed, Series A. So you have more and more small funds, business angels, people that are keen to invest into the future of food. So the future is not threatened. So even if we see a slowdown.
Thank you. And so you have talked about quick commerce. Is there a bubble in this sector in Europe? There are very high valuations, and regarding the difficulty to work on this field as retail, and the really little margins established company have, is there a future for quick commerce? What do you think?
Yeah. No, I do think there is a future, definitely a future in middle and low income countries. That's for sure, because the main cost of quick commerce are both warehouses and basically people, drivers. So we understand the unit economics in low and middle income countries, notably, for example, Turkey and some areas in south of Europe, but also Africa, Asia, etc., Latin America. The question that we are still doubtful is there a strong future in developed markets? I think there is, because when we see data points from cities such as Berlin, and when we see the huge increase in the average order for people that have been using the service for a couple of months, we see there is a future. Question is it a massive future? Is it a marginal future? Is it 1, 3, 10, 30% of the market? And that we still don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe can you share again the trend curve from the presentation? have some questions about it. Because you have talked about the different quickly about the different trends and how Europe is strong or not in each of them. But can you explain the relation between these different stage and how they are correlated or not with time? I mean, timing and evolution.
Yeah, indeed. Good question. Because indeed, when we look at this graph, we could think that what is on the left is much far away from what is more on the right. So the idea is from left to right, what you have is the level of advancement of a certain technology or trend. So on complete left, you have someone in a lab that has discovered something and it's generating some kind of excitement, and then it's rising in hype, so more and more people are talking about it. But at some point, I would say Bitcoin in 2017 or NFTs right now, people are discovering that basically it still doesn't work. It's really nice, but you can play with it, but it can't change your life, and certainly it will not help you to earn any money. And so we enter a phase of disillusion, and then some, because most, or I would say at least many, to be nice, many of these trend and technology just stay in disillusion and never come back out of it, and some come back out of the disillusion with a new, renewed business model, reached product market fit, and then recreate excitement, etc., etc. But some trends evolve much faster than others. I would say 18 months ago, quick commerce would have been really on the far left. This curve as a few months ago, and right now, quick commerce should already be advanced to the bottom of disillusion. So you have trends that move at a much faster pace. For example, if we look at alternative proteins, insect for humans have been in the bottom pit of this curve for quite some years, and you have new technologies that are moving quite fast. And we don't know if at the end of the day, cell ag, precision fermentation, or molecular farming will be the first to reach productivity.
Yeah, and yeah, regarding these different trends, can you have a word about personalized nutrition? So, I mean, personalized foods, genomic and microbiome testing kits, and also coaching apps.
Yeah, I would say that for those that know us personally, you certainly know that it's everything that is around personalization is a subject that we are quite keen of. We are really fond of this subject, but indeed, this space is not moving fast because there are issues right now to connect all this data to make something meaningful out of it. We've seen in the past years, I would say past couple of years, a new and renewed interest into genomic microbiome tests and all the testing kits. So that's why we have made this data point on this curve rise a bit higher, because we see new startups, for example, Zoe in the UK, Lycon in Germany, which we find interesting, and we expect them to make the ecosystem progress. But I don't know if it's sheer optimism from not very objective part, because we are really, really looking for this ecosystem to progress.
Different topic about insects. What do we see around it in Europe in terms of insects for animal feed, I suppose, and also insects for humans?
Insect for humans, we don't see a lot, so there is not a lot of things to say. Insect for animal feed, I would say, for as a French, I really hope it will work, because I think it's more than half of our food tech ecosystem in terms of investment for the past 3 years that has been made of investments into animal feed startups. So the insect, InnovaFeed, Micronutris of this world. So I don't know why. We are still looking for an explanation for that. So if you have one, please let us know. But why all big investments in this area are made in Europe and even specifically into France. But yeah, it's quite exciting. I would say I expect this year to be more complicated, and we don't expect, and we may be wrong, huge investment into this space. I think now it will be more late stage deals and even IPOs to let the market fund these kind of companies, because they are entering a state of building infrastructure, building factories, and it may be less relevant from traditional investor point of view.
Thanks. Next question. Now, why do established companies look at this different ecosystem of food tech?
Yeah, indeed, good question. If you look at the report, you'll find at the end of it the list of acquisition in Europe, of startups created in Europe and acquisition of them. And it's interesting because you can see that many of them were CPG or D2C brands. And so first explanation is that companies are looking for, very simply, new markets. So that's the case of Kraft Heinz, which has acquired Just Spice. So that first an explanation. You can see also it's a way to become more digital when Barilla acquires the Pasta Evangelist in the UK. So that very M&A reasons. And then when companies are looking at the ecosystem, they can be looking for inspiration, because what we often say is that traditional and established company really knows what consumer wants. They have access to many databases, Mintel, Nielsen, etc., but they don't really know about all this ecosystem of new products and what does it mean. And that's something really important for them to understand what's happening and right now in terms of new food products, but also to look at what the future may look like in 5, 10, 20, or 50 years. Because if we look at the alternative protein ecosystem, for example, with all the technologies that we've seen on the curve, what we can see is that if half of these technologies achieve their promises, the states of food, of ag, of retail will be completely different. And that is both a threat and an opportunity for big food businesses. So they have to understand what's happening and to prepare for it, because basically that's their future, which is at stake.
Yeah, thanks. As a new entrepreneur, which sector should I explore? Well, in your opinion, what are the best opportunities in food tech today?
If I take your question, I would say very with all this word, for a new entrepreneur, I would specifically look at brands. Because I think that it's a space where a lot of things are still possible. There are huge opportunities, and a lot of things are really, I identified a huge list of white spaces and areas where entrepreneurs could create value. So that would be my first answer. And then I would say I would look in also specific areas, for example, dairy alternatives, which I think is a quite exciting space right now. Packaging, either reusable packaging, biodegradable packaging, bio-coatings. So that would be my 3 key spaces.
Yeah, and you talk about new food brands. And indeed, established companies are looking at these new brands. Maybe you can explain and give us an example of what we can do at Digital Food Lab with a food corporation regarding new brands, and how we help them to work with startup.
Yeah, indeed. So, as I said earlier on, what we do is large and small, or at least medium-sized food companies, ag companies or retailers, is to help them work along their understanding of the food tech ecosystem. So our job is to start with first leveling up the knowledge. So because what we know is that there is often one or two people that are really interested into the ecosystem internally, but that's not the case of everyone. So we'll have to start by leveling up the level, share the same level of knowledge, talking about the same words, because what is innovation is not the same for everyone. Startup is a word with many definitions. So we start by that, and then I would say our core mission is to identify the opportunities. So let's say you're a coffee company. What are startups creating in terms of opportunities and threats for your business? So it can be either startups doing and selling directly coffee, or creating alternatives through molecular farming, through cellular agriculture, or it can be things that are really far away from new packaging, new machines, etc., etc. So we level up the knowledge. We identify your ecosystem of innovation, then we create a watch, not to waste it and to have to redo it a couple of years from now. And then we help you to identify the top 3 areas that you should be looking at from these opportunities. We deep dive into them, we map them, and then we find a way to address it, a way which can be acquiring as a company, to copy it, because sometimes it would be better to partner with it, to create a fund, to invest into an incubator, etc., etc. So it's really, a journey from, there are startups doing stuff, to we have a strategy plan and we know how it will cost and how we will execute it.
Yes, thank you for this explanation. So this is what we can do with established companies, and maybe a quick word about what we can do with startups.
Yeah, I would say it's a less straight up with startups. Basically, we don't work as a business for startups, or it can be the case, but for very, very large unicorns startups. So it's a bit different. But for young entrepreneurs, what we like is to work along you as board members, coach. Basically, our mission is to be the guys that you will call when you don't want to call anyone else to share bad news. So that's basically what we want to do with entrepreneurs, helping you along the way, connecting you if that's possible, and obviously at some point to show our interest. We want to be linked to the company, so we invest either our time or directly investment into the companies.
Yep. And regarding time, maybe to conclude this webinar, last questions. What is the most exciting sector in food tech for you, and why?
Good question. If the question is for me, I would say personalization, because I'm really excited about this area. I will tell you what, because if at some point we know what each of us really needs in terms of nutrition, it will lead us to redefine food, to connect food to health. We know we have a huge amount of data. You can look, for example, we've made a newsletter with graphs. I think a month ago, you had this study showing that if each of us take very small steps, we could improve and increase our life expectancy from 9 to 10 years. So personalizing food could have huge impacts. And then, because we would need personalized foods, we would need a new food ecosystem to create it. So robots, automation, more delivery, etc., etc. So I really see personalization as the key to a whole new food world. So that's really what I'm really passionate about, creating food that is better for everyone, for health, environment, etc. So that's my point of view. But I would say, if I broaden it right now, the ecosystem, not me, is really mostly excited about alternative proteins. We are obviously interested into this space, but I may think that there is too much hype around it right now.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mathieu. Thank you all for being here this morning, connected with us. So as a reminder, the webinar is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, and the report is also available for free on our website, so do not hesitate to download it if it's not already the case, and do not hesitate to share it. Also, we have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter. So if you are not yet subscribed to it, do it and share it with your colleagues. Yeah, that's it. I don't know if
a big thank you to our two sponsors again, Nestlé and Pinduoduo, which make it possible.
Yeah. So have a good day.
Yeah, bye.
Bye all.